morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So this past month I was visiting School 22. It's a school in Rochester. It's a very diverse school. And there's several volunteers from the community and the congregation in Rochester that volunteer there. And I was at a sort of like a volunteer kind of like picnic potluck. And there were lots of kids there, very diverse kids all around. And I didn't know any of the other kids there. So I was feeling a little like, it's hard when you don't know any other kids around. But I found this one little girl, and she looked pretty friendly. So I went up to her and I said, "Hi, what's your name?" And she said, "Justice." And I said, "Really? That's your real name?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, well, my name is Emily." And she said, "Is that your real name?" And I went home that day thinking about my new little friend Justice. I'm thinking about, what does it mean to have that name? What does it mean to have the name of Justice? And then I was thinking, you know what? Maybe that's my real name too. Maybe my real name is Justice. Maybe your real name is Peace. And your real name is Love. And your real name is Kindness. And your real name is Compassion. And I think that's why we come to church, right? To remember that we have real names, maybe that we're not called all the time, but are the essence of who we are. They're our true spirit. So, welcome to church this morning, and please remember your real name is Justice.
Rise in body or spirit. We're going to sing Gathered Here. And we're going to do some hand gestures to it. It's $3.89 if you want to look at it, but don't look at it because you're going to need your hands for the gestures. So we're going to go like this. It's going to be gathered here in the mystery of the hour. Gathered here in one strong body. Gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit drawn near. All right, here we go. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour. Gathered here in one strong body. Gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour. Gathered here in one strong body. Gathered here in the struggle and the power. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour. Gathered here in one strong body. Gathered here in the struggle and the power. I'm going to need some help telling a story this morning. And there's a lot of parts, so if you might be willing, start thinking now about when you might jump out of your chair and leap up, but I'm just going to call out the parts as they come. The first part, have you guys ever heard of Jesus? Do you know who he is? No. Oh, you have to ask. Especially in your church. So, Jesus liked to tell stories. And Jesus would have these sessions sometimes where he was kind of like Ask Amy. Do you know who that is? Ask Amy. She writes, when people write her with questions, they ask her questions, and then she writes back with answers. And that's what would happen. Jesus, wherever he was, people would come up to him with all their questions. So one time Jesus, so we needed Jesus. Would somebody come up and just be Jesus? Just for a moment. Yeah, sure, come on. All right, excellent. So you just have your talking, you tell the story. Yeah, good. Yeah, very good. And Jesus was talking once to a lawyer. You have a lawyer in the house? You get a lawyer? Okay. You can have more than want part 2, because this is just the beginning. All right, so Jesus is talking to the lawyer, and the lawyer asks Jesus, okay, so what do I do? What do I do to be a good person? And Jesus says, well, treat your neighbor as you treat yourself, as it says everywhere, obviously. And the lawyer says, well, what do you mean by that? Who is my neighbor? And now, as Jesus liked to do, he didn't just give her the answer. He said, well, let me tell you a story. And this is the story he told. Okay, very good. Now you guys can sit down, you can be new people. All right. So there was once a person who was walking from Jerusalem to Jericho. Any walkers around? Somebody wants to walk from Jerusalem to Jericho? Oh, perfect. This is going to involve a lot of lying down. So the man was walking from Jerusalem to Jericho when all of a sudden he was accosted by a robber. Do we have a robber?
Yeah.
Oh, a couple robbers. Yeah, there were a couple of robbers. He was accosted by robbers. And they hurt him. He fell to the ground. They took all his stuff. Look, his wallet's right there. Yeah, perfect. They got his stuff. And they ran away with it. And the man was left lying by the road. Oh, good job, Brian. All right. And then, of course, some people were walking down that road. And the first person who happened to be coming down that road, there were some retired ministers. Who were walking down, and they were just having a nice stroll through the country. Yeah, 3 of them. There were 3 retired ministers. Four retired ministers. There were 4 but they were just enjoying their lives so much as retired ministers they didn't even notice him on the ground. And they went off to go read some more poetry or something. Yeah, they left. And then a couple of fairy godmothers. Maybe just one. A couple of fairy godmothers were walking by, and they were giving out very nice things to all sorts of people. They were turning gowns. They were turning rags into gowns and pumpkins into carriages. They noticed the man on the ground. They turned his shoes into pumpkins, and they kept walking along. Well, that was it. And then there was some superheroes. Do you have any superheroes around? Okay, excellent. There was Wonder Woman and Superman. And Wonder Woman and Superman. Oh, and Spider-Man. Perfect. Will you turn around and show them what a good outfit you have for this? Look at that. Spider-Man. So all the superheroes were coming through. But they were too busy fighting evil. And they didn't even stop and notice the man lying on the ground. Yeah. Then we had a couple of senators. They were coming through. There was a Democrat and a Republican senator. Yeah, Sarah, will you be the Republican? I know it's hard. And they were they're getting out the vote, but they dropped their flyers off. They noticed the guy and they gave him their vote for me. Vote for me. And then they kept walking on. Well, finally there was a man who walked by, a man who had just gotten out of prison. And he was unemployed. He'd just gotten out of prison. He was unemployed. He was finding no at every door he knocked on. But he came by and he saw this man hurting on the ground, and he stopped. And he looked at him, and he actually got down next to him and checked to see what was going on. He found that the man needed a little help getting up, so he helped him up. He saw he didn't have any of his stuff anymore, his wallet was gone, and he took him down the road to the inn where he paid for his night's stay out of his last few dollars. And sent him on his way. So now we got Jesus come on back. So Jesus and the lawyer are back. And the lawyer says, okay, so what was the point? And Jesus said, well, which of these treated this neighbor as himself? Which of these was most merciful?
The one that came out of jail.
The one who had just come out of jail. Yeah, the guy who didn't even have a job. And Jesus said, yes, do unto others like he did to that man on the road. And that's the story of the Good Samaritan. Thank you all. Great job. Invite you now into the spiritual practice of generosity. Will you please give as you are able to the good mission of this church?
Settle in for a time of meditation and reflection. I'm going to share with you a poem by Reverend Max Kutz, a minister in this region for many years. And it has different pieces, and I just invite you to allow the images of this poem to just come into your mind. Let us give thanks for a bounty of people, for children who are our second planting, and though they grow like weeds, and the wind too soon blows them away, may they forgive us our cultivation and fondly remember where their roots are. Let us give thanks for generous friends with hearts and smiles as bright as their blossoms, for feisty friends as tart as apples, for continuous friends who, like scallions and cucumbers, keep reminding us that we've had them. For crotchety friends, as sour as rhubarb and as indestructible. For handsome friends who are as gorgeous as eggplants and as elegant as a row of corn, and the others as plain as potatoes and as good for you. For funny friends who are as silly as Brussels sprouts and as amusing as Jerusalem artichokes, and serious friends as complex as cauliflowers and as intricate as onions. For friends as unpretentious as cabbages, as subtle as summer squash, as persistent as parsley, as delightful as dill, as endless as zucchini, and who, like parsnips, can be counted on to see you through the winter. For old friends, nodding like sunflowers in the evening time, and young friends coming on as fast as radishes. For loving friends who wind us around like tendrils and hold us, despite our blights, wilts, and witherings. And finally, for those friends now gone, like gardens past that have been harvested, who fed us in their time that we might have life thereafter. For all of these, we give thanks. Amen. Blessed be.
I was in the first grade, and I was walking home from school when I heard a bike coming fast behind me, presumably one of the big kids, because we little kids did not yet ride our bikes to school. And in a moment of hesitation, I second-guessed which side of the path I should move to as I heard the bike getting closer to me. And I chose the wrong side. And the bike kind of clipped me, and I fell down and scraped my knees, and the bike just kept going. And more emotionally rattled than actually physically hurt, I cried and I ran the rest of the way home. You know, my knees were they must have been really hurt if I ran the rest of the way home. And there, my grandpa tenderly took care of my knees and my spirit. And I likely proceeded to recover with some Coca-Cola and card games, which were the cure for everything, according to Poppy. The next day, I bravely walked back to the scene of the crime, towards school, found the crossing guard, Mike, with a smile on his face. And he didn't witness yesterday's events, so I recounted to him my horrible tale, all wondering why he was still smiling. "I'm glad you're okay," he said. And then he went over to his chair, you know, the one he sat in when the kids weren't crossing the street. And he dug something out underneath his coat and his copy of the crossword. And it was my lunchbox. I had left it in my flustered state the day before, and Mike found it on the path when he finished up that day and remembered that it was mine. It might have been the Rainbow Bright or My Little Pony stickers that gave it away. And to this day, I still remember Mike, that wonderful crossing guard who companioned me from kindergarten, eventually all the way through 8th grade at the same school. And I still remember Poppy taking care of me. I still remember the event itself, which was scary at the time. Even to this day, when I hear a bike behind me, I get out of the way really quickly. But it's the memories of grace, of people taking care of me, people looking out for me, that I recall more clearly than falling down. And sure, my Poppy had a vested interest in looking after me, but at that time, Mike, the crossing guard, he was mostly a stranger to me, someone who I had not really, truly seen until that moment. And I know I'm not the only one who remembers receiving grace during a hard time. I'm talking about the times we have all fallen down, big or little falls, physical or emotional, as children or as adults. Talking about the times in our lives when, like the beautifully enacted parable we saw today, we are in a time of need, and grace, an unexpected and unearned gift, appears from another, someone whom we learn to call our neighbor. The Good Samaritan is a story familiar to those of us who grew up in the Christian traditions. Someone typically stereotyped as a bad guy takes care of a person whom he finds on the side of the road, someone who's in need of help, someone who's hurt. And he carefully and thoughtfully tends to that person, amazingly without Coca-Cola or card games. At least they left that part out in the Bible. And he gets him to a place of safety. And he leaves him with another person and some funds to make sure he's taken care of. End of story, at least on the page. But the central plot of the story is not what I really want to highlight. It's the end of the story which really grabs me the most. This Good Samaritan, anyone in our society stereotypes as bad or other, does not receive credit for his good deed. He doesn't leave a note for the victim at the inn where he was staying and say, "Get well soon, your friend Ted." I don't even read in the story whether he gave his name to the innkeeper. He just leaves him there with some cash to ensure that he will be okay. So there will be no thank you note that the Good Samaritan receives the next week. There'll be no package of cookies for his heroic act, and no parade in honor of him and the life that he saved. And I was imagining as I reread this story that maybe it's the innkeeper who gets all the gratitude in the end from that recovering victim. Or maybe the victim assumes that his friends or family helped him out. Or maybe that a retired minister or a superhero or even Peter Pan somehow came to his rescue. But the end of the story doesn't tell us what happens later. And I think we can all probably imagine a bunch of different endings based on situations we've been in when we've received help in our own lives. But this is more than just a good deed or a helping hand. What the Good Samaritan does is offer grace. Grace, that unexpected, unearned gift. So I think maybe we should reclaim and rename this story the Graceful Samaritan. A story about giving and receiving grace not from the person we might expect and not in the way we might expect it. Because isn't that how grace operates in our own lives? It can appear in both times of great suffering and joy, from near and far, from places and people we can easily name and those we cannot. It comes from our neighbor. The stranger, the friend, the bully, the ally, the conservative, the liberal, the carnivore, the vegan, and everyone in between. In fact, where it comes from is simply not grace's most important feature. I think Jesus tells this story to show that grace sometimes comes as a surprise, a beautiful gift from life itself that comes in the form of our neighbor. True neighbors in this story are defined as those who show us mercy, and I would add, give us grace. And everyone is capable of that, including all of us here today, which is why I'm going to give us a special challenge during this month of grace. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to be a graceful Samaritan, or if you prefer, a secret grace agent. Find a way to bring grace to someone's life during this month, and do it without them knowing that you were the one behind it. You'll see in your Soul Matters packet later this month, if you're in one of our small groups, that there are some ideas to get you started. You could tape some quarters to a vending machine. You could donate blood. You could leave a note on a stranger's car saying, "Have a great day," or decorate a bookmark and put it in a library book that says, "You are awesome." You and your family might be able to pay for another family at a restaurant where you like to eat. Or you could sneak over to your neighbor's yard and rake their leaves when they're not home. You could leave little sticky notes on mirrors in public restrooms that say, "You are beautiful." The possibilities are endless, and I trust our creative minds to come up with some incredible things. It doesn't have to cost anything. It doesn't have to be a certain size. You get to decide the form that it takes. And imagine that when you're acting as secret grace agents, that the person sitting next to you is as well. Imagine that your whole row today is giving out grace this month in secret ways, or that everyone in our congregation is covertly living their own version of the Graceful Samaritan. What would our churches and communities look like if we embodied grace in this way? What would it feel like to do this as a spiritual practice, as a sign of our faith in life, in God, in one another? Because that's what being a part of a Unitarian Universalist community is about. We are givers and receivers of grace, people who seek to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. There's a reason we have this poster over here on the wall with the golden rule, embraced by many of the world's religious traditions. It reminds us how we want to be in the world. And it doesn't say on there, if people agree with us, then we show them kindness. Or if people look like us, then we treat them with respect. There are no ifs in that statement of the golden rule, just as there were no ifs in the story of the Graceful Samaritan. Being a part of this church means giving and acknowledging the gift of grace to and from everyone we meet on this journey. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Whether it's delivered from a crossing guard or a criminal or anyone else, grace is worth discovering and celebrating. Especially here in community, as theologian Matthew Fox reminds us, where we are meant to grace one another, to be sources of grace, to be healers by way of grace. So it's my hope today and this month that we all be those secret sources and hidden healers in a world and in a culture that need reminders, even when times are hard, that life is generous, that life might even surprise us if we're open to it, and that grace is possible and available for all. May we make it so. Amen.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.